Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Kris. This is the American Revolution, turning the tide at Guilford Courthouse 1781. This is part 2. Before we get started, you click that thumbs up, saw how easy it is. Look. Yeah. You can do that for me, it helps out tremendously. Just one time though. Boom, like that. Bare minimum. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Click on the thanks button if you want to keep the channel rolling. Alright, let's get back into it.
Meant that for much of the war, the British could field twice the amount of regulars than the Continentals. Throughout the war, the British Army was an adaptable force suited for warfare in North America, with General Clinton in particular creating a greater emphasis on light infantry and flexible operations. The British also made use of German auxiliaries throughout the war, referred to by the Americans as Hessians, even though they came from a variety of German states. These German formations were full of professional soldiers. British combat power was also supplemented by units of Americans who stayed loyal to the king, though often underappreciated, these American loyalists would spend the war fighting their fellow countrymen. Now let's talk regiments in particular. This administrative and fighting unit was the backbone of every 18th century army. Regiments at full strength were typically 500 to 700 men strong, but the realities of attrition on campaigning could dwindle the regiment down to a few hundred men. The regiment was a soldier's home, identity, and primary formation on the battlefield. Each regiment usually consisted of a single battalion, the tactical unit that maneuvered and fought as a whole during combat. 2 to 4 regiments or battalions could be grouped together to form a brigade, usually formed for ad hoc missions and led by a brigadier general. A major general may then control a wing or a large operational force, while a lieutenant general could oversee an entire theater of war, second only to the commander-in-chief, the most senior rank in the army. During the war, British and Continental regiments functioned in the same way. Both were led by a colonel, or more typically, a lieutenant colonel in the British Army. Each company was typically led by a captain who was supported by a lieutenant and then an ensign, 2 sergeants, 3 corporals, 1 drummer, and around 60 privates. Each regiment typically contained 8 line and 2 flank companies, 1 flank company of grenadiers, the other light infantry. The line companies functioned as the disciplined core of the regiment, trained to deliver volleys in formation and hold the main battle line during engagements. On the battlefield, a regiment would deploy in companies in a row of some 200 feet long and 2 men deep. The men would rarely be shoulder to shoulder and more typically formed in an open order about an arm's length apart. The grenadiers would be made up of the tallest and strongest of the regiment and were used as elite shock troops in the field. Light companies would be made up of the fittest men of the regiment and were used for reconnaissance, skirmishing, and ambushing. They were often trained on individual accuracy and wore trimmed down uniforms. In North America, it wasn't uncommon for these flank companies to be grouped together to form a new light or grenadier battalion, creating elite or specialized formations. British line infantry were commonly armed with the 10-pound land pattern 75 caliber smoothbore military flintlock musket, better known today as the Brown Bess. Fitted with a bayonet lug that also functioned as a front sight, this iconic British firearm would remain in service well into the 19th century. Continental soldiers, by contrast, lacked uniformity in arms and carried a wide variety of muskets. These included locally produced arms, captured British arms, and imported muskets from France, Spain, and the Netherlands. The most significant supplier was France, providing over 100,000 infantry muskets during the war. Firing either musket required a practiced, multi-step loading process, and with proper drill, a trained soldier could deliver up to 3 rounds a minute in combat. To maximize the effectiveness of a musket, commanders aimed to hold fire until the enemy was within roughly 50 yards. Although skirmishing and exchanges often began at greater distances, leaders like Washington cautioned against throwing away your fire at too early or too great of a distance. If troops could hold their fire until a closer range, you had a better chance of delivering a devastating first volley. Once firing began, thick clouds of black powder smoke obscured visibility and the deafening noise disrupted command and control. Soldiers often began firing independently, creating a continuous, yet disorganized barrage of gunfire. It was in this confusion that drummers and large regimental flags became vital tools, helping maintain order, relay commands, and keep units together amidst the smoke and noise. This is also where the experience of a unit would pay off large dividends for their commanders. Other specialized units like cavalry were adapted to the tough terrain of North America. Lighter and more flexible dragoon units were especially useful. These were troops trained to fight on horseback, and they were often used for reconnaissance, raiding, patrolling, and skirmishing. Both sides also fielded mixed units that combined infantry and cavalry. Leaders like Light Horse Harry Lee, father of future Confederate General Robert E. Lee, and the British officer Banastre Tarleton commanded elite legions made up of fast-moving, motivated dragoons and light infantry. These legions could operate independently, move fast through rough terrain, launch surprise ambushes on foot, or deliver sudden saber charges on horseback, making them a serious threat on the battlefield. Artillery was typically deployed in batteries between 2 and 6 guns, positioned to disrupt enemy formations and support infantry advances. The most common field pieces were smoothbore guns, ranging from 3 to 12 pounders. This unit of measurement is referring to the weight of the solid shot that they fired. These guns typically fired solid round shot. Heavy iron balls used to smash through enemy lines, batter fortifications, or ricochet across open ground to cause maximum disruption. At closer range, they could be loaded with canister or grape shot, anti-personnel rounds packed with small iron balls that scattered on firing, cutting down anyone in their path.
They use those at Gettysburg, Day 3 Pickett's charge. Confederates were coming up the hill and they got really close, and the Union basically tilted their guns and they just waited, and they got within, I don't remember what the distance was, but it was pretty much just kill shot distance, and they unloaded with those grape shot, and it's like, shotgun, I gotta sneeze real fast. Okay. It's like a shotgun. And so as they would get closer, they would unload and it would just blow people apart. And they said over Gettysburg, there were just red blood vapor mists just all over the field. And so I'm going to guess you get within range of those. It would be no different in the Revolutionary War. You get them close enough, you unload hell. And it just, those first few people, it just blows them apart. My voice just crackled on that. It just blows them apart. There's no hope.
So that will wrap up the overview of how the armies were organized, equipped, and fought during the American Revolutionary War. It's interesting to see how the Continental Army evolves throughout the entire war. At the beginning, it is really built around that nucleus in New England, but by the end of the war, it is full of professional soldiers that are in the duration for the length of the war. There is a lot of problems with this Continental Army all the way till the end. There were problems with pay. There's even a mutiny in 1781, but those are stories for another day. If you want to see more content focused, particularly on the firearms, check out my channel, Revero 311. And I love doing deep dives into historical pieces such as this. This is an original French infantry musket, a model 1766, and it even has the initials of the soldier carved into the buttstock. If you want to see other videos of me shooting reproductions, in which I shoot single ball, double ball, and I test out different buck and ball loadouts, again, check out the video. Again, thank you to Tristan from History Rebels for allowing me to be part in this video. And now back to the much better narrator. Take care.
At Guilford Courthouse, the Continental Army rises early on the 15th of March, 1781. Eats its breakfast, and deploys to the battlefield. General Greene has decided to borrow from Morgan's success at Cowpens, deploying his army in 3 lines. The first contains his least reliable troops, about 1,500 North Carolinian militiamen, many of them raw, stationed behind a fence looking across an open field. To support the nervous men, Greene places 200 riflemen and cavalry units on either flank, with artillery in the center. His second line in thick woods comprises the Virginia militia, who, despite having seen action before, are untrusted after their shameful retreat at Camden the previous year. Their commander, Brigadier General Stevens, is determined that this will not happen again, and he places 40 picked riflemen behind the line, with orders to shoot any man that runs. Greene's third and main line sits in a clearing, comprising 1,500 Continentals with regiments from Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the British Army slowly becomes visible, having marched 12 miles that morning to the sound of drums and Highland bagpipes. Cornwallis believes he faces 10,000 men. He cannot see most of his enemy, and he is ignorant of the terrain. But he moves his 2,000 men forward nonetheless. The army is tattered and without breakfast, but after marching hundreds of miles, they are utterly determined to meet the Continentals.
They've been chasing them all over the place, and now they have the chance. And Cornwallis doesn't stop to consider they're going to fight us now. Why? They've been running everywhere. You know, we're chasing them all over this godforsaken states. Well, I guess back then it was all over the country. Why are they wanting to fight? And they marched 12 miles that morning. So did I not pay attention what time this battle started? But they've already got 12-mile march in them. So they've been busy. They can't stop and eat breakfast. And now they have to just jump into the fight because Cornwallis probably thinks we get there and they're going to retreat. But you're falling right into Greene and his whole ideas.
As the British steadily move forward, the nerve of the North Carolinian militia is about to be tested. As the anticipation increases, the supporting cannon is withdrawn to the third line. The militia have orders to fire twice and then retire in good order. As the British come within range, the volleys begin, with somewhat sporadic but deadly accuracy. The British are moving slower than planned through the muddy field and pause to return fire before turning to their bayonets. By this point, many in the militia have fired twice, while some not at all. Regardless, it was now time to leave. The line withdraws, except for the riflemen on the wings, but unlike at Cowpens, there would be no rallying the majority of the men, who flee in all directions. The British push on, dispatching units to drive off the riflemen and their now deadly enfilade fire. As the main line begins to enter the thick woods in front of them, their formations lose cohesion. They are soon at the second line of Virginians, and the battle becomes increasingly confused as both sides trade volleys. 2 Virginian regiments collapse early on the right, but many keep fighting in small groups of men. Commanders on both sides are in the thick of the fighting, and Stevens is hit in the leg and carried from the field. Cornwallis too has his horse shot from under him, and at one point finds himself alone in no man's land, being luckily rescued by a nearby sergeant. For the most part, the Virginians put up stiff resistance, as the fighting descends into a series of skirmishes from small groups of men, slugging it out in dense woods. Although the Virginians are slowly forced to retreat, many have fired 15 to 20 shots, leaving ground now littered with the dead and dying. Their commanders, including Stevens, no doubt proud to finally put the shame of Camden behind them. With the second line mostly broken, some British regiments now start to slowly emerge from the wood line. A few hundred yards ahead of them, they can see the blue-coated Continentals in good order waiting for them. The British left, light infantry and German Jaegers do not hesitate or wait for reinforcements and immediately charge up to face them. The British battle line is in complete disarray and the attack is unsupported and vulnerable. The Continental veterans hold their fire, waiting patiently until the British are within 30 yards. The volley is devastating, and the British commander, Brigadier General Webster, is hit, mortally wounded, along with many of his men, who now start to waver and step back. At this critical moment, the battle hangs in the balance, with victory possible for either side. Greene may well have been tempted to launch a counterattack and hit his divided and wounded opponents. Such a move could shatter the British or put his own army to flight. Greene does not roll the dice and instead holds his commanding position. With the pause, the cream of Cornwallis's army, the Second Guards, have cleared the woods and are now marching quickly to aid their comrades. The elite guards, without stopping to fire, are soon moving up on the right and closing against the fresh recruits of the 2nd Maryland Regiment. Relying on bayonets alone is a risk, particularly against fellow regulars, as Webster had just discovered on the left. But this time the terrifying speed of the guards has its planned effect, and without firing a shot, the 2nd Marylanders break. Upon seeing their sister regiment retreat, the veteran 1st Marylanders turn and engage the guards. Soon, muzzle to muzzle, ferocious volleys are exchanged. The fighting intensifies in bloody deadlock between perhaps the two best formations in each army. Amongst the smoke and chaos, a cavalry bugle is suddenly heard. Like at Cowpens, Lieutenant Colonel William Washington has been waiting patiently for an opportunity, and his dragoons now swing behind the isolated guards, charging through their ranks with slashing sabres. The guards are left disjointed and shocked, but not yet broken. As the dragoons wheel around to make another pass, they are joined by the 1st Maryland Regiment, who surge forward with bayonets. The hand-to-hand fighting is intense, and in the shouting, stabbing, and clubbing, the Guards' Lieutenant Colonel is killed by a Maryland captain in a bloody duel. Both sides fight on. Cornwallis has been watching in horror for several minutes from the tree line, and well understands the danger. His most elite regiments will be slaughtered if they break down the hill, which may well lead to a general collapse like at Cowpens. Accounts vary with what happens next, but it is likely that Cornwallis, without hesitating and ignoring protesting officers, orders his artillery to fire grape shot at the mass of struggling soldiers on the hill. The cannons roar, to the dismay of onlookers, and men on both sides are struck down. Although a difficult decision, the grape shot has the intended effect. Both sides scatter back to their own lines. For Cornwallis, the danger has passed, and with reinforcements ready, he prepares a fresh assault. Greene, however, conscious of keeping his army together and wary of another continental defeat, now moves to disengage and pulls his army back in good order, ending the battle. The British had won the day, and the army had performed bravely in taking the field against a force twice its size. But at what cost, and to what end?
Sorry, I just wanted to British, 532 total, 93 dead, 413 wounded. 413, 26 missing. You ever wonder what happened to the missing? I mean, I understand for the Continentals, Colonials, 1,000 missing. They just ran. They got out of there. But where'd they go? They switched sides? But yet, less dead, less wounded, less casualties overall. But 1,000, they were like, all right, we're out of here. That number is what's not good. But they also had a lot more. But still, it's not good.
The British had taken over 500 casualties, more than a quarter of the army, and some of their best troops had taken the brunt of it, the Second Guards alone taking 50% casualties. Continental losses are reported at 263 dead and wounded, although these figures were often underestimated, particularly for the militia. Nevertheless, Greene has kept the bulk of his army intact while leaving the British in a fragile position. Cornwallis had repeatedly rolled the dice to finally get the showdown and victory he craved, leaving him as the apparent master of the Carolinas. After the battle, he moves back to Hillsborough and claims that North Carolina is under British control. But in reality, Cornwallis's victory has been Pyrrhic. In less than 6 months, his field army had shrunk from some 4,500 men to now less than 1,500 fit to fight.
1780 in October, he lost 1,000 after Kings Mountain. Then you're talking, 3 months later, he lost another 1,000 after Cowpens. And then the next month, 25 to 15, lost another 1,000. Wow. So in 6 months. October, November, December, January, February, March. 6 months. Sorry, I had to count them on my fingers. So in 6 months, he went from, he lost 3,000 people. 4,500 to 1,500. Wow. And it was September 1781 with Yorktown. Wow. Yeah, somewhere around, there's Yorktown, then there's Colonial Williamsburg, somewhere around here, and then Jamestown, and they call it the triangle. You can hit all three basically in a day. I didn't. Those two were closed. Williamsburg was open.
Burning his supplies had left his men permanently hungry and forced to plunder local farms, while any hope of a loyalist resurgence had been decimated. Worse still, the campaign had done nothing to stop supplies moving south to the partisans, as little of the province is under practical British control. In Hillsborough, after 3 weeks of next to no local support or supplies, Cornwallis is finally forced to abandon the backcountry and marches, vanquished, to Wilmington and the coast to refit and resupply with the Royal Navy. Although Greene had suffered a tactical battlefield defeat, he had succeeded strategically in the campaign, achieving all his objectives and chiefly exhausting the British army. Although some would criticize the retreat across North Carolina and for not counterattacking during the battle, Greene has set the stage and a strong foundation for future success.
Greene didn't need to. The British were being the aggressors, When you're the aggressor, you will tend to lose more men than you will if you're in a defending position. If green charges down, Cornwallis's men get into line, they have some volleys, they charge, they retreat. Stay in this position and make them come up, which is, what they did. There was a fight, they retreated, and then he got out of there. But if you are the attacking force, you need to have the ability to have more troops at your disposal because you're going to lose. I'm not going to say double, but you're going to lose more. I mean, look at Grant lost 60,000 when he took charge, and Robert E. Lee lost 39,000 or 44,000. But Grant lost all those extras because he was constantly just boom, 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 just attacking. Grant also had the ability to do that because he could get reinforcements that Lee wasn't able to do. And I'm not trying to compare, but you understand that what I'm trying to say is when you're the attacking force, clearly you're going to be able to do that. And the British being the attacking force is not wise because getting reinforcements over when now this is a global war, they're not able to do that. They have to be smarter with what they have. And they were still going about it like they were able to pull up loyalists and stuff like that. And the loyalists aren't going to join you if they see you're sacrificing a hell of a lot of people.
By April, Green cautiously shadows his opponent towards the coast, while his eye begins to turn to the now vulnerable south. Thank you for watching our series on the American Revolution.
Well, thank you for making it. Okay. I really like History Rebels. They really are good. Well, I gotta move back up here. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed. I did. I really like the way they do this. So I'm going to end it here. And until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.